Hello friends, my name is Emile and welcome back to some more Forza Top Gear laps. Now, there's plenty of exotic cars for you to spend your money on here in Forza Motorsport 6. However, they do end up costing quite a lot of money. Even this Ferrari, which I use for these sort of standby screens, costs 440,000 credits. So, in today's episode of Forza Top Gear laps, I figured I'd take a different tactic and group together a bunch of cars which can be yours for 20,000 credits or less. Let's see how well they do and see if they can upset any of the more expensive cars already on our leaderboard. The first car off today is the Porsche 944 Turbo, 247 horsepower, 3,115 pounds of weight. Now, this car can be yours for just 12,000 credits. A Porsche for just 12,000 credits. Yeah. Admittedly, this car is a little bit overclassed compared to everything else here today. This was added in the Porsche DLC, and basically when it came in at the price it's at, nothing can really match this when it comes to bang for your buck at this sort of end of the market. It's an extremely cheap car, which on paper offers very good performance. However, what is it actually like when you drive it? Well, it's terrible. It is terrible. I hate this car. It is awful to drive. Honestly, it really surprised me on just how bad this car is to drive. You know, I wasn't expecting huge miracles with the 944 Turbo. Obviously, you know, it's got relatively average statistics, it's a bit cheap, it's an old sports car, but I wasn't expecting it to be as bad as it is. The suspension is soft, it wallows through the corners, it has understeer, it has oversteer, and it'll just swing back and forth between the two. It is a quick car around a track, I will give you that, but it's just not enjoyable to drive at all. It really is not a fun car to drive. I hated it. Hated my time with the 944, every single minute of it in fact. A car which I hated a little bit less was the Nissan 300ZX, which is good because that's the next car. This is the twin turbo model with 276 horsepower and it weighs 3,351 pounds. Now, of course, this is the most powerful vehicle here today. You know it's going to be a slow episode when I say that. The 300ZX car I actually quite like. Admittedly, I do prefer sort of the Mitsubishi GTO. That's my favourites of these Japanese cars, and there are Japanese cars I do prefer over the 300ZX. But it's a pretty cool car. You know, it looks very good and all the rest of it. When it actually comes to the driving experience of the 300ZX, it's alright. It's an alright car. Definitely better than the 944 Turbo to drive this one. Yeah, it's just an alright car. A little bit heavy feeling. Admittedly, you know, if I had the choice, I would probably go with the R32 Skyline, which is sort of a similar car. The R32 is a little bit quicker, drives a little bit better. This does want to oversteer. Admittedly, the R32 is four-wheel drive, while this one is, of course, rear-wheel drive. So, yeah, you do get some oversteer from the 300ZX, but it's certainly not a bad car to drive. Definitely could work as a race car, you know, if you was to put some Forza Aero on this, some tyres. I'm sure it would make you a pretty decent budget race car, but, you know, as it stands, it's a pretty good car, actually. I did, after driving the 944, the 300ZX was a nice little escape. However, we do come back to bad cars next with the Lexus SC300, 225 horsepower, 3,560 pounds of weight. This is the heaviest vehicle here today, and my god, do you feel it through the corners. This feels very heavy. I wasn't actually sure on how the SC300 would drive. You know, this thing is the darling of the drift community almost. They do seem to like this car quite a lot. Looking at it, it does look a little bit ungainly. I wasn't expecting it to be quite as ungainly as it is, though. Again, heavy car, heavy car. You can feel that in the way this thing drives. However, one thing I wasn't expecting, especially from a 1997 car such as this, is this does have a bit of diff slip. The differential on this car is... it feels like it's open, which is very strange for a car of this area. You know, the 944 Turbo didn't have this issue, the 300ZX didn't. In fact, none of the other cars here today really did. I don't know why the SC300 has the bad differential, it's weird. You know, it will oversteer as well through the corners, the SC300. If you push it hard enough, it's not as bad as the 944 Turbo, about on par with the 300ZX when it comes to the rear end letting go. Ultimately, out of sort of these three sports coupes, the 300ZX would definitely be my pick, with the SC300 coming in second, and I wouldn't want to drive that 944 again. Actually, the 944 and the SC are about equal in my book. Anyways, ignoring that, we now move on to some of the more interesting cars of today. Next up, BMW 323 Ti Compact, 168 horsepower, 2,767 pounds of weight. This was an interesting car that I just sort of wanted to throw in here. I've always really liked the 3 Series Compact, actually. It's definitely my favourite of the BMW 3 Series. I do prefer the E46 Compact, but the E36 Compact's pretty cool as well. Bit of a weird car, don't really understand why it exists, to be perfectly honest with you, because it's basically just the 3 Series with a slightly chopped rear end, and that's all there was. They were even going to make a sedan version of this at some point, which would have been completely pointless. Anyways, ignoring all of that, what is the Compact actually like to drive? It's a decent car to drive, actually, this one. I did try building one of these up for race once. I didn't spend particularly long tuning it. It was a little bit oversteery. You can feel that even from the stock car. Then again, you know, sort of the E36 M3 is also known for being a pretty slidey car. Both of them are fun cars to drive. Obviously, the 323 doesn't have any edge over the M3, you know. The M3 is only 30,000 credits as well, so if the budget can slide to 30k, I would probably say get the M3 over the 323 Ti Compact. But it is a fun car to drive. It's definitely something different to see as well, which I do rather liked about the 3 Series Compact. It's just a bit of a different car, really. Next up, Toyota Celica, 2003 model, this one, 187 horsepower, 2,560 pounds. Again, this was another car which I decided, you know, it's a little bit different, let's throw it in here. This is the front-wheel drive Celica, of course. We had the GT4 go round last time, I believe it was, and the GT4 did relatively well. I was kind of wanting to see how the front-wheel drive version of it would do. Admittedly, you know, it is down on power compared to the GT4. GT4 was pushing 255 horsepower, this is pushing 187. Admittedly, it's all going through the front wheels, so you wouldn't want too much power from it, but still that's something to bear in mind. Out of the two, I would probably go for the GT4, because it's got the 4-wheel drive, the chassis is a little bit better balanced. Don't get me wrong though, this car is decent to drive. It's very decent to drive actually. I believe this is another 12,000 credit car, so around the same price as the 323 Ti. Between this and the Compact, I would probably go for the BMW, as much as I do like the Celica. Always like the Celica actually, I wouldn't mind owning one of these cars in real life, but as it stands in Forza, the BMW is just, it's got the rear wheel drive chassis. You can do a little bit more with the Compact, you've got a little bit more freedom in the upgrading. However, you know, over both cars, I'd probably go for an ST205, because that's a good car as well. But yeah, Celica, certainly not a bad car to drive though. If you want to try, again, if you want to drive something a little bit different, give the Celica a go. It's not a bad car. Next up, Honda CRX, 158 horsepower, 2,161 pounds of weight. The least powerful vehicle here today, however, it is the lightest vehicle as well. 2,161 pounds is not a lot of weight for a car, especially sort of looking at some of the cars here today, which weigh well over 3,000 pounds. Anyways, the CRX, little front-wheel drive, sort of hot hatch, sort of not, because technically not a hatchback. I don't think the CRX is a hatchback. I don't know, I didn't really look, to be honest with you. Anyways, I did want to try the CRX out, and actually I was pleasantly surprised. This is a good car to drive, actually. One of the better handling front-wheel drive cars. Of course, you would expect that from Honda. Honda do build very good front-drive chassis. And the CRX is pretty good, you know. It handles its 158 horsepower well. You know, the lightweight also helps out. It means through the corners, this thing is very, very good handling. On the straights, it does miss out. It is probably the slowest car based on straight line speed here today. Well, maybe apart from one. It's not a quick in a straight line, but you wouldn't particularly expect the CRX to be. But through the corners, certainly, you know, if you took this car to, say, Catalonia School Circuit, and put it up against, you know, the 3 Series Compact, hell, maybe even the Lexus SC300, the CRX would probably stand a good chance. But, you know, on a track like Top Gear with some straights and stuff, we'll really have to see where the CRX comes in, although I'm not expecting massive things from it. Next up, we move into some of the more interesting muscle cars. First up, the Ford Mustang SVT. This is a Cobra model. It's also a Foxbody. 235 horsepower, 3,125 pounds of weight. I was sort of looking through the cars. I wanted each car to have a sort of comparable, so, you know, with the Celica and with the CRX, because we've got two front-wheel drive cars, you know, 944, 300ZX, 300 SC, you know, they're all comparable. So, you know, I was like, sod it, let's throw the Foxbody in, and I've also got another American muscle car after this one. The Foxbody, how does it drive? Oh, this is a heavy feeling car. After the nimbleness of driving the CRX, the Foxbody did come as a bit of a shock to the system, because, yeah, this thing feels so heavy and so lethargic. Admittedly, it's not. It's, you know, the actual handling ability of this car is pretty decent. It will oversteer. You know, it is a Ford Mustang, you'd sort of expect that from it. Not a bad handling car, though, certainly. I have driven worse. You know, the 944 Turbo, for example, was a worse handling car than the Foxbody Mustang. That wasn't a sentence I was expecting to say today. But, you know, the Foxbody isn't a bad car for a 90s muscle car anyway. You know, you expect these things to be absolutely horrible. The Foxbody isn't absolutely horrible. Of course, you know, there are better alternatives, even in the Mustang family, but it wasn't a bad car. And finally today, we have a bit of an oddball here. This is a Chevrolet Monte Carlo SS, 180 horsepower, 3,522 pounds of weight. You know, sort of logic would dictate the rival for the Foxbody should have been the IROC Z Camaro. Both of them are about the same price. You know, in the end I decided to go for the Monte Carlo though, just because the Monte Carlo is something a little bit different, probably a bit unexpected. And, you know, in terms of the Mustang, it can't really compete. You know, it's down, well, it's 400 pounds heavier and it has 55 less horsepower. You wouldn't expect these two cars to compete. But again, you know, I wanted to throw the Monte Carlo in here because it's something a little bit different. The Carlo to drive, it's another lethargic feeling muscle car. It feels even more lethargic than the Mustang though. It has a lazy 4-speed transmission. It has a 5-litre V8, which doesn't really do anything. I would like to point out, yes, 1988, this is the sports model of the Monte Carlo, and that 5-litre V8 can only push out 180 horsepower. Yeah, this is definitely a, it's one of those muscle cars. But, I can't really say anything particularly positive about the Carlo. It's a big, heavy bruiser of a car. Yeah, it's hard to say something positive about the Chevrolet Monte Carlo, unfortunately. But, it wasn't the worst car I've driven. Certainly wasn't even the worst car I've driven here today, and I wasn't particularly surprised by it. You know, I wasn't expecting this thing to be amazing. I wasn't even expecting it to be any good, so I guess in that regard I wasn't disappointed. Anyways, onto the times, and unsurprisingly it's the 944 Turbo, which is the fastest car of today, going into 82nd with a 130.213, which actually, considering how bad that car was to drive, isn't a bad time. A little bit down on a 350Z, but it was quicker than the 911 Turbo, which is weird. Again, going down the board, 300ZX finds itself in 95th place with a 131.445, beats out an Escort RS Cosworth, Delta, Clio V6, beats out a Lamborghini Miura as well, which certainly isn't bad when you consider the Miura is a 400,000 credit car. The SVT Foxbody also does surprisingly well as well, 108th, 132.785, not too far off the Nissan Juke Nismo RS. Quicker than the Celica GT4 and the Subaru BRZ, so yeah, I guess that gives the Foxbody some tuner cred or something. Anyways, we find our biggest concentration of cars here. The BMW 323 Compact goes into 119 for 134.856. The Lexus SC300 is just behind it, going into 120th with 130.927. The 2003 Celica goes into 121st with 135.716. Beats out an Aston Martin DB5 and a AW11 MR2. And the CRX goes into 126 with 136.431. Beats out Volkswagen Corrado, which isn't bad. That just shows how good that CRX is. Yeah, good, fairly decent showing from those cars. They weren't going to light the world on fire, of course, but yeah, you know, those times aren't too bad from any of those. And finally today, the Monte Carlo SS is unsurprisingly the slowest car in today, going to 140th with 142.493. But that still isn't a terrible time. I mean, it beats out, a Ford Fiesta XR2 by over a second, Astra Techline. Not terrible, but it wasn't going to be great. Anyways, there we go, friends. So you found out the value you get from 20k cars, and some of them can indeed beat cars which are much more expensive than them. Anyways, in the next episode, we're going to be taking a look at something hopefully a little bit faster, so join me for that. Anyways, friends, I want to thank you all very much for watching. My name's been Emile, and until next time, farewell.